Rob Shapland, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much.
So, first time in Norway?
No, second time. I've been to Svalbard.
Svalbard,
which was
yeah.
absolutely amazing. But first time in Oslo.
Yeah, that is technically Norway, I
It
guess.
is Norwegian, yeah. It's just very different to here.
I should probably know that. But you've been there. I have not been
Yeah.
there. And I saw that you were with Isaac Sweden a few months ago.
Yeah, I did their Stockholm conference, which was good fun. There was singing as well.
Singing?
In Swedish. Yeah,
Yes.
Which obviously I didn't join in with because
Hell,
my
I'm
Swedish
good.
isn't very good.
I think I had guessed which one that was, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Really good. So
Yeah.
I love being involved in the Isaac stuff.
Yeah, and you're also, I would guess, a member of the British chapter.
No.
No.
I'm literally
Okay,
not.
awesome.
It just seems to be I speak for them a lot, but I'm not actually a member.
Yeah, okay. Well, that works. As long as you're helping us out, we're appreciative
Exactly.
of that.
Yeah.
So, I did some OSINT, some cyber
Sure.
stalking of you.
Nice.
And I see that you're a TV personality down there.
Done a bit of TV work, yeah. She's good fun. I love it.
Yeah.
Especially during the kind of the Russia-Ukraine, the early days of that, there's a lot of cyber things going on, of course. They needed spokespeople to talk about stuff.
Yeah.
Done a bit of that, done a bit of kind of hacking in people's houses and stuff for TV and things, which
Okay.
is fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's been really good fun.
So besides like the makeup prep and everything, like how is it to like actually prepare yourself for like speaking to the masses about security? Because that must be kind of difficult.
Yeah, because you're so used to talking to technical people, right? That
Yeah.
you need to completely dumb it down. Sounds a bit rude, but you need to make it more simple.
Yeah.
So when you're speaking to that many people, and as well, you get very short slots. Like these programs, you get like a minute, maybe 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So you've got to distill whatever it is down to the easiest thing you can as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
And the other thing you don't realize is the presenters, they don't care. Right,
Yeah.
they ask you the question and they're not even looking at you afterwards. So
Yeah.
the camera goes to you and they're looking for the next thing.
Yeah.
When I did a TV program with Piers Morgan a few years ago, he asked the question and he's on Twitter by his leg. He's just flicking through his Twitter profile, like looking for things.
Yeah, and you're sitting there talking to a
so
wall.
I'm talking,
then,
and he's not listening at all. And,
Yeah.
and it's not just him. Like everyone's the same. Whenever I've done TV, no one's actually looking at you, which is a bit
Yeah.
weird because I guess the camera's only on me.
Yeah.
So they don't know that the person's not looking at me. So it's kind of strange getting used to that, trying to do it while knowing the person's not even caring about what
Yeah.
we're talking about.
Well, do they tell you that it's going to be like that before you go up there, or do they just expect it to be fine for you?
First time, no, they didn't tell me, and then I learned from there, like, okay, this
Yeah.
is how it is,
Yeah.
and you just deal with it.
And it's live.
And it's live, yeah, it's live, and you're wearing makeup, which is weird. Like,
Yeah.
I haven't worn makeup very much.
Yeah.
And it's in 4K. You're like, oh my god, I don't want to see myself in this
Yeah.
much high definition.
Yeah. But it's fun though.
It's fun.
It's nice
It's
to get
really
invited.
fun. And it's nice to see behind the scenes of how it all works, and all
Yeah.
the equipment and things, especially in the big TV channels.
Yeah.
So it's exciting, yeah.
Maybe that's why in the movies they always like, we're in, because they have to just dumb it down and
Yeah.
get in
Oh,
there.
yeah. I mean, I did a TV show where we had to hack into a house.
Yeah.
Right, for Channel 4 in the UK. And they said, like, how will it work? And I explained it to them. And I said, it'll take about 6 hours. They're like, no, we can't do that. What we'll do is we'll set the password to be password on the Wi-Fi. And then you can hack that. But can you show us, can you make it look cool? I was like, yeah, okay, I can do that. And it was literally like we do it, and they made me say we're in.
Really?
Like 10 seconds in, we're in.
We're in, yeah.
And then they'd like put these cameras in the house, like webcams. Obviously, they were terrible quality.
Yeah.
So as soon as I hacked into the webcams, they then put proper like HD cameras in the house to make it look like I'd hacked those cameras. But actually, then it was quite good for the telly because you could see properly.
You could see
all
properly.
grainy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everything was kind of staged. It was
Yeah.
realistic. I made sure it was still realistic.
Yeah.
But it was all staged to happen very quickly because no one wants to see you brute forcing a password for 4 hours, right?
No,
So-
it's not that fun.
Exactly.
No. Just open up the Wi-Fi through the terminal, and then it looks like you're a hacker.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you're not on TV,
Yeah.
what else do you do?
I work for a company called Falanx Cyber. I do head of red teaming is my kind of job title, although it varies on a day-to-day basis almost. So I'm in charge of the kind of objective-driven attacks on companies. So rather than just pen testing where you're targeting an individual system, I will get given the name of the company and an objective like, can you break in and steal the database for all our client information? And that's all I'm given. And I've got to build the attack from scratch based on that. So doing all the open source intelligence gathering, doing all the phishing attacks, phone calls, physical intrusion of buildings, getting access to the network, then doing the technical stuff, stealing it, and then hopefully evading detection and getting away without getting caught.
Yeah.
And then after that, my other kind of main passion is doing training. So taking the results of what I've just done, which maybe if I broke into their building, I've recorded on hidden cameras. I'll then go and do training sessions for the general staff. Again, making it simple, but trying to teach them how this is done, why criminals do it. And then rather than saying, you shouldn't let people tailgate you into the building, I can instead go, look, here's a video of me tailgating into your building,
Exactly,
and
yeah.
sitting at your desk
Yeah.
and plugging a USB stick into your computer. And that has much more of an impact on the staff's kind of awareness of what can happen than just saying, don't do this, don't do that, etc. So yeah, combining those two together are kind of my main thing, but I do them standalone as well.
I was sitting here thinking like, we do penetration tests, red teaming stuff here in Norway as well, but the clients, they usually just skip over all the tailgating. They skip over the stuff like, okay, let's just, in order to save money, we'll skip those things. Yeah. But you're doing the training aspect of it, and that's why maybe that's actually worth those extra things, because then like you could show them a video of you actually doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's like a much more powerful message.
Exactly. Yeah.
I find a lot with training, a lot of companies will just rely purely on e-learning modules or something, and it's a tick box exercise. You try and, for compliance reasons, do it like that, but it doesn't actually teach staff what to protect against and make them care, more importantly. So by doing it like this and showing them the video, and you get all the gasps in the room and everyone going, that's my desk, oh, my mate let him in, and all that stuff, and suddenly it really, and that sticks in their head for years, or so I've been told anyway. So it's a much more powerful way of doing it. So yeah, I mean, you don't have to do it like that. I mean, I do training anyway, and I tell stories and make it interesting and a bit scary and stuff, but it's just that little bit more powerful when it has that other stuff alongside it as well. And I've heard it in Norway that the social engineering, the physical intrusion stuff in the buildings is not very commonly done, maybe because everyone's just really friendly and just holds doors anyway, and I've been told it'd be very easy in most places. But maybe that'll come along in a year or two, and people will start testing it a bit more over here. In the UK, it's quite normal to test physical security alongside the cyber security.
So you're going to meet a member of our board member tonight. Her name is Johanna.
Okay.
She actually, a couple meetings back, she presented they did like a red team.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was one of the things that they had a feedback is like, maybe next time, maybe we actually don't do the physical part, because it made a lot of people uncomfortable, or there's like a social element to it here in Norway that's not as popular, I guess.
I mean, there's a bit of that in the UK. You have the problems with the privacy side of it as well, because obviously you're filming people kind of without their direct permission, and then if their faces appear in the video, especially if they were the one that let you in, that can create issues. I've had a few places where it's been like directors of the company that have let me in the building, and then you show the video in the training, and then it just kicks off because they are not happy that they are like the person that let someone in. So there's quite a lot of political side to it. You have to be a little bit careful.
That's probably the one that that's probably the most value for the client, actually, because the director, everyone remembers that,
And some directors are cool about it. They're like, well, if I made the mistake, anyone can. Others are like, oh, I don't want to be the one making the mistake. Can you cut that out?
So the leaders you get rid of.
Exactly. Those guys. So it varies with company. Yeah.
So you've been working with this sort of stuff for 15 years now, which I can't see on you. What do you eat? You look very young. We could be the same age.
I just run a lot. That's all it is. Run everywhere. That's good. Like a small child, just run between rooms.
So 15 years. So like I said, after this, we're going to go do an ice hockey meetup about red teaming. But what I thought we talk about today is the defensive stuff. Yeah, sure. It's always fun to talk about red teaming with or defensive stuff with the red teamer, because there's always there's kind of two different viewpoints on it. Yeah. And we spoke briefly on the phone about this earlier, and your comment was, and I agree with it. We spend a lot of money on network security all times. It's EDR, NDR, CM, all these abbreviations, right? Yeah. Still happening. Ransomware, still things happening. And just to get the context right, does Falanx work primarily with SMBs, or enterprise is like a market segment you go after? Yeah,
primarily SMBs. That's always been our target market, but we have picked up some enterprise level clients. Not so much on the SOC side, but more on the red teaming and the training side. We've got some larger clients. I mean, I agree with you. The defensive side is interesting, especially when you come at it from the red teaming angle, because you don't necessarily have insight into what defenses they have. Like some companies, when you do a red team, and they want to share with you, they want to say, we've got these defenses and we want to know, whether they're going to pick anything up or not. Other companies, it's completely blind. Like, we are this company, this is your objective, go. We're not going to say anything about our defensive systems. So you have to treat it in that case as if there is a very good SOC sitting there monitoring everything you're doing. So the evasion techniques you use are, have to be more advanced. And that's something that's come along in red teaming in the last few years, because go back 5 years, hardly anyone had detection systems, not effective ones anyway. No one had a SOC. If they did have a SOC, it wasn't working very well, or it was an internal SOC, which was basically just one guy with some monitoring system, and he couldn't work out how it worked or whatever. But now the bigger organisations are starting to have those SOCs in place. So you've got to be a little bit careful how you first get into the network, and then when you're inside the network, how you move around without triggering those alerting systems. But like you mentioned there, like we're seeing big companies getting breached all the time. And these are companies that it's not like they don't have antivirus and EDR and XDR and all these things, right? They, in many cases, do have them, but there's a problem, right? It's not working. It's either because there's overload, like there's too much information coming in, and the people that are interpreting those results don't have enough time or enough expertise to actually decide what's real and what's not. Or those systems aren't working, they're not configured properly, or maybe there are areas of the network that don't have those systems working on them. Now, you often get devices that are out of scope for the detection systems because they can't have the agents on them or whatever, or they're too sensitive, or they're Windows XP machines or whatever because they need them for some legacy system that's going to fall over if you touch it. And the hackers are going to go for those. So that's what I do as well. The same techniques. Go for the systems that you think are not going to be covered by the monitoring systems, and move around in such a way that you look like a normal user. So I'm not going to be getting onto the computer network and then launching a massive brute force attack of everyone's passwords. I could have done that 10 years ago and nobody would have picked up on it, unless I locked all the accounts out, which is something I recommend you don't do because it's a bit embarrassing when that happens. But nowadays you can't do that. It's too obvious. So you have to use techniques that are a bit more subtle. So it's best to arrive on the network with credentials ready to go. So you've got them from somewhere else. So either from a data breach, or you've got them from a phishing attack done in advance, or my favourite at the moment is just to phone them up, because that doesn't touch any systems, right? If I'm just phoning up you at your desk, pretending to be from IT, if I can convince you to give me the password, I've now got that, and I've not touched anything. So there's no point that can be detected except with the staff member, which goes back to my point about training being so important as well. So now I'm arriving on the network with the username and password. I've got to get in there somehow, but that's assuming I'm arriving on the network. I can now just log on as that person and then potentially just extract data they have access to, and that's a breach. Or if they happen to be an IT person, for example, high level of access, drop ransomware on the network, and away you go. So it's things like dropping ransomware on the network. If it's got a good XDR system in place with a good SOC that knows what they're doing, it's not going to get very far, right? They're going to isolate it before it spreads around the network. But data exfiltration can be quite hard to spot, even if you have got a SOC there. If they do it over a period of months, just taking out a few megabytes a day, really, really hard to spot that.
And when you have like conversations with, I guess the buyer, whether this would be a CISO or whatever, do you actually go through like a checklist? Okay, do you want me to be loud, or do you want me to be silent, or do you actually go through this?
I do. Yeah. So although it's red teaming in an ideal world, it's completely blind. You just get given the name and stuff like that. Often the CISO want to have some level of involvement in choosing how you get in and the things you do. So some clients will want you to do physical intrusion, others won't for the reasons we talked about already, the privacy concerns, etc. Some will want you to do phishing, others will want you to do vishing. It just varies completely in how they want to test it. And you have to be careful that you're not restricting it so much that it's no longer a red team, because you can get it like, okay, you're only allowed to do external infrastructure attacks and phishing, and that's it. And you're like, well, it's not really, that's just 2 pen tests now. It's not really
exactly.
red
That sounds,
teaming. And when you're inside, can you just plant a file on the network and leave it? And I'm like, well, I can, but you're not now. You're still not doing red teaming anymore. And these 100 systems are out of scope. Okay, you have that problem a lot of the time. But that out of scope thing is especially an issue. And I understand there are sensitive systems that you don't want to knock over, but of course the real criminals don't care about that.
They go for In your experience, do you see that the CISOs kind of take whatever you accomplish and use it to get more budget? Is that kind of like their end game there, or what do you think they're?
I mean, there's 2 different end games, right? So the first one is that they want to prove a point. We are vulnerable. I've been telling you for years we're vulnerable, but you don't believe me. So now I've got this company in to go and hack in, and look what they did. They got access to all this sort of stuff. They use the same techniques that criminal groups are using right now. This is how easy it was. I need budget, I need expertise, etc. So they use it to prove the point. Or the second thing they're doing is we've got great defenses, but we haven't tested them. So we've invested millions in all these systems, but we haven't been hacked as far as we know. So let's employ a company to actually hack us and see if they can get through. In which case, they're looking for me to fail. So in the first example, they want me to succeed so they can get the budget. The second example, they want me to fail. So it's a weird...
Still trying to prove a point, I guess.
Well, exactly. Yeah, and it might, to me, I want to succeed. I want to break in. I want to get through those defenses. But it's difficult in that scenario where they want you to fail because they will often rig it slightly as well. They'll try and make you fail. Like I've done a social engineering job a few years ago. My task was to get inside the building and just take some video footage or whatever. But they were doing it because a company they work with wanted them to. So they one of their clients, they wanted them to do social engineering as part of the due diligence of working with them. So they wanted me to fail, of course.
You'll win this contract if Rob doesn't get it.
So what they did was they found a photo of me and sent it to all their employees. Look out for this man coming on this day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's quite hard to break in, right, when everyone's looking for you.
Yeah.
Turned out, though, when you went inside this office, you could turn right down a corridor, get in a meeting room without seeing anyone at all. So I still managed to get in the meeting room, plant the device, and get out without anyone actually seeing me. So they failed the test. But yeah, I mean, it was completely rigged in their favour. But it's just lucky I didn't run into anyone on the way.
Yeah, I guess that kind of takes value of certain things away. But have you ever not gotten in?
Yeah. Only once properly. So I think I've done about 200 building intrusions. 200? Something like that over the 15 years. Yeah. And I've had one proper failure, which was really early on when I first started doing it. And as part of the process, you do a reconnaissance beforehand. So if I was going to be breaking in here, a week beforehand, I'd be looking around the building, looking for the side entrances, back entrances, taking photographs, people ID badges, making copies, etc., working out what the security looks like, that sort of stuff. And I was doing it for a company big company, not tell you what sector they're in, but very well defended. And they'd basically, I drove into a public car park. And I was doing the reconnaissance. I had a pair of binoculars. I was looking at where the doors and CCTV cameras and things were. And it was marked on Google Maps as a public car park. But it turned out about 3 days earlier, the company had bought that car park and put it inside their perimeter. So when I drove in, security clocked me coming into the car park. When I didn't get out of the car, after about 5 minutes, they then sent these Land Rovers over, boxed my car in, dragged me out of the vehicle.
Not for you, but...
No, not for me, no, but good for them. And then they took me into their building, put me in, they had like holding cells and everything, like threw me in this holding cell.
Just for driving in there?
Yeah, just for driving in there. And, telling me what am I doing? And I was just said, I'm bird watching. Like, no, I don't believe you. And when I do these intrusions, I have a consent form, like a legal document saying you're allowed to break into a building. That's exactly it. Yeah, normally carry two, one fake one real one, just in case the fake one works first.
Cool.
Which has a phone number back to my office.
Yeah.
But if they don't believe that, then you get out the real one. And the first time I went for it, the security guard, I don't know if he thought I was going for a knife or something like that, but completely flattened me. And, as you alluded to earlier, I'm not exactly a big guy. So, I go down like a sack of potatoes, absolutely flattened. And I'm just lying on the floor going, it's all right, it's just a form. Gave them the form and they sort of checked it and kicked me out of the building. We broke into one of the other offices a few weeks later. But in reality, I might have gone to prison for that, I suppose. But, that's the only proper failure I've had. So now, even during the reconnaissance, I've got a backstory and things like that I use to make sure it's all legitimate. And I think... it sounds great, I've done 200 buildings, only failed once. There's been a few that I've kind of gone into and then backed out of because everyone's looking at me really suspiciously. So you kind of get a sense for what's going to work and what's not. And I make sure to do it properly. Like I think a lot of companies that offer social engineering services, they just get their pen testers to try and tailgate. And that's the entire scenario. We'll try and tailgate. If it doesn't work. Whereas I set up 2 or 3 different pretexts. You're dressing up as a cleaner, an employee, a guy that's auditing the temperature of your windows, whatever I think will work to get me in the building. Try different scenarios, have those all set up, and then go in. So there's a lot more planning that goes into it to make sure that I maximise the chance of actually getting in. Because I think of it as like a personal failure if I don't get in. So I put a lot of pressure on myself, which means I get very nervous. So then you have to kind of calm yourself down, because if you look nervous, people pick up on that. So
exactly.
It's kind of vicious
you probably
cycle.
don't even get nervous anymore then, I guess.
I do if I haven't done it for a while. So they tend to come in like big groups. So a company will say, we've got 10 buildings to break in, so you do this over the course of 2 months. And by the time you get to the 3rd building, you're just normal. You just look out and do it. But if you've gone 3-4 months without doing it, then it's different. Or if you do a company that's a bit better defended, if you're talking about a defence company or a military place or something like that, when it's a lot more difficult. The security is there to stop anyone getting in that's not supposed to be there. Whereas in most office buildings, maybe there is security, but they don't really care, or they don't know everyone. They don't follow procedure perfectly, or the security procedures aren't very good. So it's relatively easy to get in. But in those harder places, there's obviously a lot more chances for it to go wrong.
So without going into your customer groups, I would assume that people that want you to get into there physically, those are actually people that actually like perimeter security is extremely important for them. So that would be like energy companies,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you get a range. Like in the UK, social engineering is quite a common thing to do as part of your security sort of process and testing. So you'll get even companies in sectors you wouldn't think would be that bothered. They still don't want people getting inside their building. Maybe they've had an incident in the past. It's amazing the amount of companies you talk to, and someone's got in the building, they're like a drunk person just wandered into the office or whatever and nicked a laptop or things like that, and then they panic, right? And they think of it as some huge threat, so they want to get us in to try and see what the polls are. But I mean, the big problem with it is, if I turn up at a building, I could tailgate the wrong person, right? Let's say I tailgate you into the building and you know about security and you turn around and go, what are you doing? Why are you following me? Most people, 99% of people won't do that. But you can just get unlucky, right? And just follow the wrong person who just happens to look back and go, I didn't see you scan in. So there's always that chance of failure. Whereas when you're doing other technical systems, if there's a vulnerability, you will find it. You will find it and you'll be able to exploit it as long as you give it enough time. Social engineering, you could get unlucky and fail on any given day, even if the company's not that well defended, because you just happen to have the wrong person.
Well, the name of the game, I guess. So when you get these assignments, do you get to see the results of what they saw you doing afterwards? Like, did they say, okay, here's the alarm from our Suricata, or here's the alarm from what?
Yeah, often, especially if I'm doing the training afterwards. So I'll often say to them, what was the fallout of what we did? So, have you got internal CCTV footage of me getting in? Have you got details like logs of security or whatever? In a lot of cases, they don't know you were there. And you have to tell them that this is the time I was there, and they won't know unless you tell them, because you hope you didn't get caught. But especially with the training, you want to get as much information as possible from them to make sure that the training is customized to their procedures and their staff and things like that. Rather than saying, look, how you failed, it's better to go, this is the policy, this is the procedure you should have been using, you didn't use it, and this is what you should be doing.
Have you done any purple teaming?
Yeah, done a bit. So especially with companies that have quite mature SOCs, we will work with them directly. So normally we'll get into the network, so we'll either do what we call an assumed breach, where they just let us in, or we'll do the whole outside breach thing and then get in. And then when we're moving around the network, that's when we'll do the purple teaming stuff. So we'll talk to them and say, these are the commands we've sent. Which of these did you pick up? If you picked them up, what were they flagged as? So were they flagged immediately, look at this and isolate the machine? Or was it just, in amongst the 1,000 other alerts you get on a day-to-day basis? Did anyone correlate these 4 or 5 different events that happened together and work out actually that's part of the same attack chain? Or have you treated them as 4 or 5 different things going on and therefore haven't raised the priority well enough?
Which is usually the case, I would assume.
Often the case. Often the case is that maybe they know about something weird has happened, but unless it's really obvious, they won't combine the things together.
And I would guess for those purple team, you're not making your own malware for these sort of engagements, because you kind of want them, in a purple team, you kind of want them to pick up a little bit. You want to teach them, I guess.
Exactly. They're not going to learn anything if I use something that's completely undetectable.
That nobody's seen before. Exactly.
There's no point in doing that. There's no point in burning that on a purple team, because they don't learn anything from that. But if I use, it will depend. Sometimes I'll start off with really difficult techniques to spot and then get more and more loud and see when they'll pick it up. Other times I'll start the other end of the spectrum and I'll start off really loud and then go, okay, we saw that, and then I'll get a little bit quieter until they go, no, we don't know where you are now.
So how many so I guess those companies you do purple team with, they obviously have internal or external SOC. This is just now I'm just being curious. What in your experience, which one of those actually detect you more often? Which one of those do a better job?
I mean, surprisingly, in my experience, the internal SOCs, because they understand their own networks a bit better than the external SOCs. It depends. So it's going to sound a bit biased, but generally the smaller SOCs, so the companies that haven't got 1,000 clients on their network, that they're looking after, are better at picking up stuff because they know their clients' networks better, right? Because they only work with a few different clients. Whereas I've worked with large companies that use, huge SOC companies that have thousands of clients, and you'll be amazed what you can get away with because they don't alert, or when they do alert, it's hours down the line. It's 3 days later or whatever. They're saying, we spotted something. And by that point, it's too late. The internal SOCs, they know their network, they care about it. It may be that they've been alerted, right? It may be that the CISO's gone, guys, there's a red team happening in a week's time. Be more on alert. So there's probably a little bit of that in some of the tests I've done because they don't necessarily want to catch out their own SOC guys, whereas they're quite happy to catch out the external SOC guys.
Well, it's interesting because in my Norwegian, Scandinavian experience. It's kind of like the only companies that have their own SOC. If they call it a SOC, then they're a bank or an energy company that actually have money behind it and competent people, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, in the UK, we have banks have their internal SOCs, insurance companies have their own internal SOCs, but it's not that common, but it's becoming more. We're seeing a lot more companies taking it in house and being maybe they have an external SOC that does out of hours. Or something like that, or does the triage is the first thing that happens, but the internal SOC then takes over. Yeah.
So I have some blue team questions for you as a red teamer, and I don't know the answer to them, so that's why I'm asking you. See if we get a conversation to get out of it. So every time you're talking to a client about that doesn't have a SOC or CM service, or they're going into MDR, right?
Yeah.
Then you come at them, you show them a PowerPoint and say, there's the EDR, there's network stuff, there's logs, there's attack surface monitoring, there's there's a huge thing, and that they only have money for maybe one or two of those.
Yeah.
And it's not, and then they say, okay, well, what do you think we should have?
Yeah.
And then you're like, that whole process of prioritizing, and I know the proper answer is okay, sit there with the client, talk to them properly, get to understand their environment. Okay, then we would do this. But in reality, it's never like that anymore because it's like a very competitive situation. There's many vendors in there. They don't want to tell you their budget because they're worried. Then they think that you're going to use that against them in some way, which I understand. I get it. Yeah. In that situation, how are we supposed to give them good advice, or how's the customer supposed to prioritize where to put their monitoring?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because you need to know the context of the client. But like you said, you're in a bidding war with 10 other companies, and they're not going to answer 100 questions you've got. And you're going to have to keep coming back to them.
Nobody has time for
clarity on that. So you have to kind of generalize and say, well, this is the size of the client, this is the sector they're in, the maturity level of that sector generally is this. They're not going to buy XDR because XDR is going to be too expensive for them. So instead, we're going to go for maybe EDR, and we'll do monitored EDR. And then we can at least take the alerts from the endpoints, which is the most likely place to get compromised, and then maybe do some training because that's relatively cheap in comparison to other things, and you get quite a lot of bang for your buck, so to speak. And then maybe if they've got a little bit of budget left, we might do some testing or something. Like we normally, when there's limited budget, we will normally say, let's stick with EDR and then let's use any budget we've got remaining to do some other security things, rather than trying to hard sell them on the full detection stuff that's going to cost them loads and loads of money. And also to them it's a hard sell to a smaller company that maybe doesn't know what they need. If you're telling them this costs X thousand a month, this is going to cost 5 times that, it's really hard to say to them why that's worth that, because like MDR, XDR, it's almost like insurance, right? You're selling it to a company and they don't get anything from it really. They don't get a tangible benefit other than a little bit of like, I can sleep better at night.
If we do our job, nothing happens.
Well, yeah, exactly. So you've got that problem in that how do you prove to them what you're doing is actually doing something? And you've got that, obviously, that initial problem when you sell it to them, and then you've also got the problem down the line when month by month nothing has happened, and they're going, well, why are we paying this amount of money every month? Nothing's changed. Nothing. What I'm getting is a report every month saying you've seen 4 million alerts or whatever, but I don't understand what that means. So yeah, it's a challenge. More mature organisations, that's fine. They understand that. You feed into their internal systems, and it's all part of things they need to do. But for the smaller organisations, it's a definite challenge for them to know what they want and for you to know what to give them.
Yeah. So I go on this emotional roller coaster. Like, what I'm doing, is it actually providing value? And then you're like, okay, here's some cases. You talk to the TI guys. Okay, thank God, it's actually But because I've had, maybe it's kind of our like history in mnemonic. We've had clients for a very long time, and those clients, we started out with a network sensor 10 years ago, and they still have a network sensor, and they've added some logs. And now, every quarterly status meeting, we're even like, we really don't see that much going on in our clients. So we'd really like to put an ADR agent on there. And then we give them the prices, and they're like, yo, that's literally more expensive than everything we already have from you.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I mean, that, first of all, you have a price from 10 years ago. That's been adjusted for inflation. But second of all, like it's expensive. And so it's like, I'll rephrase that question. Is it EDR that actually, in your recent experience, is that what actually gives the client more value in those sort of, in your red teams? Like the EDR actually picked you up, but nothing else?
Yeah, not really, no. It's more having multiple detection points. So the EDR can be bypassed, right? Most EDRs can be bypassed. it's the stuff you do when you're on the network, when you're moving around, is normally the thing that gets picked up.
So network traffic then. Yeah.
So that's kind of, my answer before is kind of then wrong because I said EDR, but that's because on a limited budget. But for a company that's getting hit by a sophisticated threat actor that is using these detection, that uses the evasion methods, you need the network detection all over the network, in the cloud. You've got multiple sources, multiple points where the attack can be detected, rather than just relying on the endpoint to pick up the attack. Because if that doesn't, then it's free reign for the attacker after that.
Yeah, so it's like in the event of an attack, the EDR is actually the only thing you can't really trust anymore.
In a way, yeah. I mean, you hope it picks something up, and it will pick up stuff. It's not useless. It will pick things up. It just depends on the level of threat actor you're up against and what they've done to arrive at the network.
And obviously, once those sort of things happen, then you get a budget. Then they understand the importance of network traffic monitoring. Like we can't see. Do you know if they're there still anymore? Nobody knows. We need to be able to.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
But budget never comes until things like that. That's actually my biggest takeaway of working for this for 10 years. Is that's when you get a budget, is when there's an incident.
Yeah, and then there's a huge budget.
There's a huge budget,
and it becomes number one on the board's agenda, and everything's all they talk about. Prior to that, it's just this nebulous threat that might never happen.
Yeah.
And therefore, we don't want to spend money on that because it doesn't bring us any immediate benefit.
Yeah. Which brings us back in the full circle. Maybe that's why to keep the level of interest and engagement up, right? Because what could happen is, okay, there's an event, we use a bunch of money, and then new management after a couple of years, and they're like, why are we spending billions of whatever, so much money on security? Then that starts going down again. How can we, I would assume it has to do with, training and testing. We could involve red teaming, purple teaming.
Yeah.
How can we keep that level of interest up so that isn't the dip doesn't happen over time? Yeah,
exactly. So, it's rather than doing something once a year, you have some ongoing program where you stagger what you're doing, and you do the training regularly, and you do different events and all sorts of things. A big companies are good at that, right? They have whole departments that will deal with the training, and cyber will be a big part of that. But smaller companies, it's, here's an e-learning module once a year, take this and do this quiz, and that's it. That's you're certified for cybersecurity for the year.
Right.
Okay, great, but that might get you through the cyber insurance audit, but it's not going to get you through an actual incident, is it?
Right. So, kind of out of place in the conversation, but I was listening to podcasts yesterday, and they were talking about the CLOP game.
Yeah.
And they were saying that they basically they had a 0 days. They had something to get in, and they just scanned the internet and just boom, hit everybody at the same time, and then just sort of laid low. That's not really part of your sort of normal red testing.
No, because the nature of being an ethical hacker, I suppose, is you can only target the organisations that you've got on your list. So that people that have contacted you. So you could scan the whole internet and then hit them with one vulnerability. Yeah. Which is how real gangs operate, right? Yeah. Many gangs are looking for those open windows. They don't really care who they're going for. Whereas with pen testing and red team ethical hacking, you have to target the organisation that's going for you, and you can't even hit suppliers. You can't do the third-party risk thing because
that's out of contract.
It's not. And they're not going to pay to test one of their suppliers. The supplier's not necessarily going to be happy to be tested, because then if they fail, they're going to worry about losing the contract with the main client. So you are limited in what you can do. Not just by that, but of course you're limited by budget and time and all those things that the real criminals aren't. So you're doing the best you can, but you're still nowhere near the levels that the criminals can do. And the criminals have other options.
They don't have rules,
they have no rules. So bribery, blackmail, threatening, you can do all of that stuff. I can't offer you 10 grand to run this executable on your machine, but someone else could. So,
right. Yeah. How do you simulate that part then? Because that's part that, I don't know the numbers behind it, but I would assume that's probably like a significant risk for organizations today, is the fact that they don't patch their stuff, right? Or especially 0 day, they can't really patch anyway. But
simulating that insider threat type thing.
No, I'm thinking about simulating the fact that their patch regime just sucks. You
tend to find that during not necessarily during the red team, you find that during the internal pen testing side of it. So often when we're doing a client, we'll do the red teaming, and then on the back of that, we'll do a full internal pen test, and that'll cover all the patching levels of all the machines on the network and things like that. And then you see large organisations, the level of missing patches is phenomenal because they've just got such big estates, right? They run a Qualys scan or an ESSA scan or whatever, and they've got 15,000 missing patches or whatever, or more than that. And they don't know where to start, and they've got critical patches missing, but then they've got a defined testing process where they have to run, run the update and then have it on the machine for a couple of weeks before they can then apply it to the other machines. And then you've got this big lag between when a 0-day comes out and the patch comes, and then when the large organizations actually update the machines, which is of course where the hackers can then slip in. So,
the basics aren't that basic, are they?
They're not for an organization that size. No, not for huge organizations. I mean, you feel like they should be, but they're just not. Like, I've got friends who work in cyber for huge companies, and they just go, oh, we do the best we can, but it's just so many systems, so many networks.
Yeah. How has I'll throw a company out there, Zscaler, right? How has, if everybody was to implement, Microsoft has come up with some similar solution, Palo Alto has something like that, so not just them, but zero trust, getting rid of the network. How would that affect your life as a red teamer?
It would make it more difficult, for sure. And we have this all the time. Since I've been doing this for 15 years, the new technology comes out and you have to adapt, right? But there's always a way. So although, when this zero trust thing becomes normal, if it does become normal, we'll have to adapt. We'll have to come up with new methods to get in. So I don't expect it to be the thing that fixes everything. I just think it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for us. But there's always going to be a way to do stuff. There has to be.
Yeah. I guess in that case, you would probably be going more after identities.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that for me? Like, why is identity the new perimeter? I hear that every day now.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because you've got, for large companies, you've got thousands and thousands of staff, right? Working from different places all around the world with different cultures, everything's different, right? So you're trying to target those individuals. And I mean, I've always done this. This is something that social engineering has been, always been the way in, is to target that individual, get access to their ID, and then you naturally, as an employee, you have to have access to things. You can't do your job if you can't have access to data, right? So if I can just be you, that's how I get the data. So that's always going to be a way in. I can't think of a way where it's going to be like you don't have access to any data on the network or whatever. Even if you don't have a network, it's going to be somewhere, right? You have to have access to data, whatever you call it. You have to do something in your job, whether it's SaaS services, whatever. If I can get your identity and I can take control of that, then I'm in. And there's always going to be a way of doing that. Even if it's biometrics or whatever, there's going to be some way I can get hold of that.
Yeah. So you as Rob, as red teamer, you just sort of shift your focus away from other things just to get the identity. Yeah. That's your full focus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you forget about almost everything else and you just go after that.
And have you had tests where that's your sole purpose to do that yet? It's like,
no, not yet. No. I've not had any company that's implemented anything to that level where that's the only way in. Yeah. But it's often the focus anyway. Right? It's often the focus is getting hold of someone's identity to do something. So
with all your ways of getting in, is that probably the most useful thing then? If you had to pick one, getting credentials.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you can get credentials, the physical intrusion stuff works great, but it still works better if you've got credentials when you arrive. Yeah. Because if I break in this office, I don't want to have to sit here for 8 hours trying to brute force passwords or whatever, because I'm going to get detected, whether I get physically detected by someone walking past and go, who's that guy? Or by someone detecting that I'm doing something weird on the network. Whereas I've got the username and password before I even arrive here. And maybe I don't even need to arrive here. If I've got the username and password and there's a VPN without two-factor, or I can get the two-factor code somehow, then I can get in that way and I don't even have to go anywhere near the building.
Interesting.
So getting hold of username and password is absolutely critical, I think. Yeah.
Cool. One more, the cloud in general. And I don't remember what they were saying, but they were talking about, okay, now there's actually like cloud native exploits, whatever that means. Is that a thing can you unpack that for me? I don't even know what it means, but
that's just marketing speak, marketing speak, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, they're just talking about the fact that criminals have had to adapt, that a lot of companies are now primarily based on SaaS systems, right? We don't have that much on-prem stuff anymore, most organizations. So, it'll either be in AWS or Azure, or be in a bunch of different SaaS systems. So we're just talking about criminals that have written software or malware or whatever that can log into those systems and extract data from them. So it's not, it's not complicated.
It's just new. It's just
adaptation to what's happening. Yeah. And often again, that comes down to the credentials. If I steal your Microsoft creds, I've got access to most of the SaaS systems that most companies will be using anyway. So I can, and a lot of companies use SSO as well, right?
Yeah.
So you can single sign on through loads of different systems.
Yeah.
That'll often be with your Microsoft ID. So again, it comes down to that identity. If I can get a hold of that, I can probably log into all of those systems anyway. So
yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Now I remember the reason I asked that question is like there was like Microsoft had through some bug they had sent like a token in the bug thing, and that was like so crazy. But that's probably like the only time. That's not very often that you actually hack Microsoft. Is you usually hack the person using their credentials.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be directly attacking Microsoft to get hold of the credentials. That'd
have to be a very expensive assignment for you.
Yeah,
right?
it certainly would. It certainly would, and it would. I don't think it'd ever be the easiest way.
No, not at all.
To be honest, like most people are so trusting that you can just get hold of their credentials in whatever way, or they're just there already because their credentials were breached and they were logging on to Facebook or whatever with their work ID. Their work email and stuff.
So you're maybe a fan of this identity as a new perimeter thing then?
Yeah, I mean, it might make it easier for me in a way.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Do you have any tips and tricks for those listening, like OSINT sort of things? Like how do you get somebody's credentials?
How do I get hold of it? Well, okay, a few different ways. So obviously phishing is the normal way to do it, but in my experience, email phishing is becoming a little bit more difficult because that's where organizations focus their defenses. And it's also where staff are used to looking for phishing. So if you talk to a normal person, what is phishing? They'll say, that's bad stuff in my email. They don't think about it in their LinkedIn inbox and stuff like that. So I will go often through LinkedIn or through Instagram or through a phone call where people are not on their guard. But LinkedIn, I find, is one of the best ones because you can connect to someone anonymously and people will accept if they're in the same business area as you, especially if you use an attractive profile picture. That's one that's good way of getting it. So you then build up these fake profiles with thousands potentially of connections. As long as you get to the 500 plus thing, it tends to look like
nobody looks at that after that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you get the 500 plus connections. You send a message to someone on LinkedIn, and maybe you ask them something really simple, like maybe you're pretending to be a professor from a university and you're a cybersecurity professor and you want their opinion on something that you're writing. So you ask them some really basic questions. And then after a few weeks, you ask a few more. And then a month down the line, you say, look, I've just finished writing my paper. I'd love it if you could review it for me. You've been so helpful. And then that's the attachment or whatever.
You enable macros, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So people aren't on their guard on LinkedIn and other social media platforms and text and things like that. Yeah. So I tend to avoid email a little bit more now, as well as the fact that there's no defensive systems directly on LinkedIn. Like the email has, what I mean by that is the email has like secure email gateways and stuff that's going to quarantine emails and sandboxing, all that sort of stuff. If I send you a message on LinkedIn and you open it at work, maybe there's not going to be the same level of stuff pointed out that. Yeah.
If it's on your endpoint with CrowdStrike on it, maybe.
Yeah,
but
maybe. Yeah.
But isn't that kind of strange that you can actually send like a malicious file over LinkedIn? Did you think that there'd be some sort of sanitation?
I mean, it depends. Yeah, I guess it depends on how you've written the malicious software, whether it's easy to pick up or whatever. But often, maybe you go after creds instead. That's a little bit more difficult to reliably ask for someone's username and password through LinkedIn.
Kind of harder,
So it's context.
I'm sure you've done some shit like that before.
Yeah, but then I'll often rely on calls. So phone someone up or pretend, maybe set up a fake Microsoft Teams domain. It looks like it's from the company. You send a message in saying, we need to update your computer with something, and they accept the Teams call, and then you get to download something or whatever.
Yeah.
Like there's loads of different ways of doing it. As long as you don't mind talking to people, then maybe you can convince them.
And I would also assume you're a good customer to like custom clothes places.
Yes. Yeah. Custom clothes, ID badge printers, all that sort of stuff. So I've got a massive box full of dress up gear, loads of different outfits that I use for different scenarios, depending on what the objective is. Different pretexts require different things. Like, I've got loads of cleaning company outfits, but if I've got to sit down with a laptop out and connect to the network, the cleaner looks a bit suspicious when you're doing that. So I won't use that outfit. Then I might use a telecoms engineer or something like that instead. So it's all context dependent on what they want me to do. Cool. But got loads of different outfits, and I'm always thinking up new ideas. That's one of the most fun parts. Actually, is come up with the idea of how you're going to break in, and then getting the outfits ready, and then when it works, you get that really big buzz from getting in. Yeah.
I know the perfect way to end this. Are you using Worm GPT yet?
Amazing, what, sorry?
Worm GPT?
No, not yet. No,
okay, so after this, you'll learn what it is tonight,
okay.
but I'll tell you now too as well. It's ChatGPT without rules.
Oh, okay.
It costs $60 on an underground forum, and it's basically everything ChatGPT is built in the same model. Yeah. But there's like, who is Rob Shapland? Who's Robby Peralta? And it will tell you, all that the internet knows about you, basically.
Okay, well, you could also use somehow missed this, so
you could use it to write malware, and it's just like, we actually had another guy at an ISAC meetup that actually tricked ChatGPT to do it, but it took him half an hour on stage to get him to do
so I've seen some of that stuff. I did some of that in the early days of ChatGPT. I did some of that stuff to get malware written and things like that, but I hadn't seen this latest thing.
So this is you'll see it tonight. But
I'm excited.
The video that I'm going to show you says do not use this because it's horrible, but obviously it's going to be used. It's already being used by that. So how is that going to affect your work moving forward? All these cool tools that you're going to be able to have available.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it easier, doesn't it? It skips out the whole stage of having to write custom malware and stuff, which is complicated, like getting it past detection systems and then testing it and things, and all the different EDR agents, because you don't necessarily have access to a CrowdStrike agent, a cyber reason agent, all these things. So if we can get something that can do that for us, then much easier.
Well, that'd be interesting if that, because in the video that I was watching, which I can't confirm these things because it's a darknet forum or whatever, but I think that his mission was to gather all those endpoint engines and have that in the ChatGPT thing, so that you could actually ask it like, will this work? And they're like, according to this version, no, or whatever.
Okay,
that's a scary future, though, right?
Well, yeah, because that's used by me, fine, I'm using that for good, but the majority of people are going to be using that for bad, right? And if everyone has got easy access to stuff that can evade detection, then you've got a real big problem.
What happens then, though? What are we supposed to do? Just give up, or like what do we?
Yeah, I mean, it's down to the EDR suppliers to find out how this thing works and
stop it.
Stop it.
I guess a lot of responsibility in them.
Have EDR agents that actually are able to detect what it's doing. Because at the end of the day, like when you're running malware, it's got to do something, right? It's got to give access. It's got to steal something. It's got to encrypt something or whatever. So there has to be a way of working out what it's doing at a basic level, and stopping it, or at least alerting something strange is going on. So we're down to them to work out what these novel methods are that it's using.
I love how, like, right when we started talking about this Worm GPT, it literally got darker.
I know,
in here.
that was cool. I thought you'd done that on purpose.
No, I did not. Well, I guess it'll be an easier world for you when we get there, and it'll be a harder world for the defenders, I guess.
Yeah, it will be, so not a good time to go and work for EDR companies, probably.
No, right. Mr. Shapland, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Robby.
And looking forward to your presentation here in 45 minutes.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Nice, thank you.
Cheers.